Hello, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Clarissa Bayag, Union Pacific's Chief Communications Officer. And while moving freight by rail is already the most environmentally friendly and responsible option compared to overland, Union Pacific is striving to be a part of the climate solution. So we're exploring new technologies and ways of doing business to further reduce our carbon footprint and pass along those savings to our customers. To meet our climate goals, we're leveraging biofuels and renewable fuels, which have experienced a high demand and growth. And we're also working with our customers to ship these products. Following our webinar earlier this year on hurricane preparedness, customers said they wanted to know more about renewable fuels and biodiesels, and that's what we're going to present to you today. So we have some great speakers lined up. Joining me today are Thad Cowell. He's our General Director of Sustainability here at Union Pacific, and he's going to share our sustainability strategy and how we're incorporating biofuels into each of our goals.
Unknown caller.
We also have, and apologies for that, Veronica Bradley. She's our Director of Environmental Science from the Clean Fuels Alliance of America, and she's working closely with our team and other teams to advance the education around environment and climate for public health benefits, with a focus on bio-based diesel and sustainable aviation fuels. Veronica will share how Clean Fuels Alliance America works with rail and what the future looks like in the industry. We also have Chris Kankowski, our General Director of Bulk Marketing and Sales, and Chris will share how our marketing and sales team is working with customers to transport biofuels today. Mark Lutz, our General Director of Fuel and Environmental Operations, is going to talk about ongoing biofuels projects. And Jeff Glasgow, our General Director of Strategic Sourcing, is going to close us out by talking about how producers can also sell their fuel to Union Pacific. I'm going to have some quick housekeeping before we jump in. One, from a legal disclaimer perspective, this slide just underscores what we won't be talking about. We won't be talking about pricing, contracts, or anything that may fall into the antitrust category today. Thank you for understanding. Next, let me talk to you a little bit about how we're going to handle Q&A. So, ask questions at any time. You can scan this QR code, and you can also use the chat feature on this Teams channel in order to ask questions. You're going to see a QR code on each slide, so you can just scan it with your camera on. If for some reason you don't have the ability to do that, you can also just email us to connectup@up.com, and we'll also be able to grab your question that way. Finally, we are recording this session. So if you're uncomfortable with this, you're welcome to log off and watch the replay later. Before we jump into biofuels, I want to talk to you a little bit about Union Pacific's strategy. Safety, service, and operational excellence will equal growth. From a safety perspective, we're focused on being the best at safety. And we've come a long way and continue to do so. Just a really interesting soundbite is that a Union Pacific train travels around the Earth 49 times before a major incident. So, and UP track-related derailments declined by 28% in the last 10 years. Another pillar of our strategy is service. And when we talk about service, we're talking about delivering the service we sold our customers. We measure that based on a service performance index. It looks at what did we do 3 years ago, and how do we make sure year over year what our best monthly performance was continues to improve for each customer, because each customer wants service in a different way. We innovate for growth. So when we talk about cost control and asset utilization, both are focused on making sure that people who are closest to the work make the decisions and that we're spending resources wisely. And speaking about spending resources, we invest about $10 million a day on infrastructure to focus on really doing what we need to do to move freight for you so that we can continue to grow. And last but far from least are our people. We care deeply about our people. We offer some of the best paying industrial jobs in America. We give free college tuition to any employee. And we also offer all employees opportunities to become owners in our company. You are a part of people, our stakeholders. We have customers, we have communities, we have employees who have joined today, and we're excited to talk to you about our strategy. Before we do that, we'll play this video. bold team rises on machines of steel and gold, buffed and buffered with passion and pride, we become the fleet. We rise to defy all obstacles and to beat all odds, knowing winning is the pursuit of what is possible. Building bridges and scaling mountains, we weather frost and fire. Connecting at the intersection of imagination and innovation, we are Union Pacific. Our strategy, safety, service, and operational excellence is our key to growth. To be the best at safety, we look out for each other. We carry goods with courage and care for customers counting on us, safeguarding communities depending on us, ensuring everyone makes it home. To deliver the service we sold our customers, we bring food and fuel to nourish the land, grow economies, heat homes and hearths. We energize industries, moving construction cargo, chemicals, petroleum, and plastics. We transport transportation, hauling finished vehicles and their parts for all major manufacturers. We move the world, serving all 6 major gateways, leading service to and from Mexico, sustainably connecting our continent with commerce from across the globe. We do this with operational excellence, powered by predictable precision, speed, reliability, and resilience. We are thoughtful about asset utilization, empowering those closest to the work to make the best decisions. We exercise cost control, spending resources wisely with a buffer for the unexpected. We know people make everything possible and engage our teams and stakeholders, listening to their needs and investing in their success. We are legend and legacy, steam and dreams, made of the engines that shaped our nation. We are one fleet. Born from steel and powered by will, we carry the weight of the freight that fuels our world. We are Union Pacific. Now let's get started. Thad, over to you.
Great. Hey, everybody. It's good to be here. That video is just inspiring to me. Thanks so much for showing that. You know, if you look at greenhouse gas emissions reduction, fighting climate change, Union Pacific really is well positioned to help all of our shippers, all of our stakeholders to reach their near and long-term greenhouse gas reduction goals. Rail's already one of the most sustainable surface transportation solutions, and Union Pacific's leading the way then in going forward with some ambitious goals that we've already made real progress on. So let me clear this chart for you here a little bit. The most common way for companies to measure greenhouse gas reduction and how they're doing along that journey is what's represented on the left here. We call that greenhouse gas intensity. Essentially, it's how efficient are you with the greenhouse gases that you're creating to get the job done for your company. It's a rate type of measurement. So in this case, it's millions of tons of greenhouse gas emissions for the number of gross ton miles of service that you're providing as a transportation provider. And when you look at all of the Class 1 railroads here over the past 4 years, it's pretty clear. Union Pacific has made the largest reduction of all of the Class 1s over this recent 4-year time frame. We're really proud of that record, but that's not enough for us. It's not only about being efficient in terms of greenhouse gas production, but it's also about actually decarbonizing, actually, while we're growing our business, actually reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. To that end, we've set a very ambitious goal for the near term. We've worked with the Science Based Target Initiative, which is really a worldwide standard for the approval of greenhouse gas emission targets. Worked with them to get approval for a target to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions on an absolute basis by over 50%. Between 2018 and 2030. And we're already 19 points into that 50-point journey. So we've made real progress here over the past 6 years. And biofuels represents a really important lever for us in continuing that journey towards accomplishing that target in 2030 and beyond. Now, it's important just in terms of looking at background, then why is biofuels so important? Look at the place of locomotives and locomotive fuel in terms of our overall greenhouse gas portfolio or footprint, right? It's really all about the locomotive. When we look at our direct greenhouse gas emissions, that's the fuel we burn and the electricity we use, right? it's all about the locomotive. Over 95% of that direct GHG emissions comes from our interactions with locomotives. When you look at our entire footprint, including the materials that we purchase, like rail and copy paper, and the services that we purchase, whether that's people, our vans, our crews, and other types of services that are provided to us, even when you kind of take that big look, locomotives are still 80% of our total GHG footprint. So I like to say that we have a really straightforward issue, but there's just a lot to do to work on that. Next slide, please. Let's talk about what some of those strategies then involved. Really, when you're going to reduce your greenhouse gases as a railroad, it's a pretty straightforward issue. You can be more efficient and use less fuel, right? You can reduce the carbon intensity of the fuel you're using, or you can transition away into an entirely different type of propulsion for your locomotives. And to that end, we've got the following strategies in place. When you look at operating efficiencies, I know that Clarissa already talked a little bit about operational excellence. That has a real impact in terms of our GHG reduction efforts, whether it's operating the network efficiently in a way that both pleases our customers and helps our network to be more fluid. If it's about better matching the number of locomotives we put on a train to the train and how many locomotives are needed, that kind of matchup, or running longer trains, also improves our efficiency so that we reduce our overall fuel consumption. We're also using technology on different types of technology for fuel efficiency efforts, whether it's installing essentially cruise control on locomotives so that we don't rush up to a stop signal, but instead we coast up to it, thereby saving fuels. We're modernizing locomotives with a $1.2 billion program that's going to not only increase fuel efficiency on those locomotives, but increase their reliability. Again, another way to use fewer locomotives. Those are some examples of how we're in the near term investing both for network reliability and operational excellence, which also has the payoff of decarbonization. And then there's renewable fuels. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more on the next slide, but again, that's changing the carbon intensity of the fuel you burn. Over the long term, we're continuing to test, evolve, prototype, and work with our suppliers and our supply chain to find that next generation propulsion technology for our locomotive fleet. Hybrid locomotives are really promising, and we've rolled out prototypes to be able to test on them. This is the use of a locomotive with an associated battery car, and they work together just like a Toyota Prius, essentially, to turn off the engine when the batteries are charged and can do the work instead. When the batteries are depleted, the engine charges up the batteries again and continues to allow the locomotive to work. We've also placed orders for zero emissions battery electric locomotives that we plan on using and testing in Southern California and other locations potentially on our network. Now, that's a whole new kind of technology, and our suppliers are working on literally inventing that with the funding and the commitments that we and some other railroads have made. We're interested in that, but we placed that order back in 2021. I'm just telling you, there's real obstacles. It's not a layup on these new technologies. And so that's an important consideration to think of when you think about how railroads are going to decarbonize. The new technology, the new propulsion is still needing to be invented, tested, vetted, and made available commercially. And so we're interested in other steps that we can do immediately as well, which is where biofuels comes in. Lastly, we're decarbonizing our yards and testing electrical equipment in our intermodal ramps, for example, and also investigating and looking at ways in which we can incorporate green electricity into our operations through purchases and solar and other types of green energy production technology. Next slide, please. So I told you that it's not a layup, right, to get from here to 2030 and beyond. Well, in the meantime, biofuels do represent something much closer to a drop-in technology that will allow us to continue to decarbonize as we head towards our 2030 goal. And we're matching our talk with action. Over the last 6 years, we've over quintupled our utilization of biofuels in our overall everyday locomotive fleet from 1% to 6%. That doesn't sound like too much maybe to some of you, but it's industry leading at this point, and we have a public target to take that 6% from last year and turn it into 10% next year, along with a goal to get to 20% by 2030. So we've got some ambitious industry-leading targets. Biofuels will help us to reach those goals, and we're testing biofuels to be able to reach those goals as well. That's our biofuels and its place inside our larger strategy. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Veronica at Clean Fuels Alliance America. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Thad. Really commend all that UP is doing in setting its climate goals and acting on them. Implementation is not easy, and so love working with you all on that. So just a quick note on Clean Fuels Alliance America. So we're a trade association, and we represent kind of the entire supply chain for clean fuel production for biodiesel, renewable diesel, and sustainable aviation fuel. So you can see kind of we're all across the U.S. and Canada, and our membership is, of course, primarily fuel producers, but we have our feedstock providers, so the bio-based material that creates the fuel, as well as fuel distribution partners and partners like Union Pacific, so end users of our fuels, and having end users like UP in our membership is great, because then we get this direct line of sight into the transportation within our supply chain, and we can have these great positive feedback loops where UP helps to decarbonize. That makes our carbon footprint smaller too. So it's really a great synergistic relationship. Next slide, please. So I like to always level set with everyone. We always talk about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. I like to make sure everyone knows why and how clean fuels kind of falls in there. So, of course, greenhouse gases, predominantly from petroleum, come up out of the ground and are emitted into the atmosphere, and that those greenhouse gases build up into the air. That just makes the earth warmer and changes the weather and disrupts kind of the balance that we've been used to. And of course, it's risky for the people on the planet, and we see a lot more disasters as a result. Next slide, please. So how do clean fuels kind of help with that? Is because we are based on, rather than petroleum coming out from the ground, we use bio-based carbon. So you can think of it as recycling that carbon from the atmosphere, as some of those biomaterials are grown, whether that's agricultural, soybean oil or canola oil, or some of the waste products like used cooking oil, tallow, and even from ethanol byproduct distillers corn oil. And so we kind of have that net effect that we're preventing that buildup in the atmosphere. So if you go to the next slide, preventing that buildup is what prevents and mitigates climate change, and the science around this is really important. So we know that our fuels can reduce emissions by about 77% on average, up to 85-90% on that wells to wheels basis or life cycle basis for the whole supply chain. But the science doesn't just say how much we need to reduce emissions, but when, because it is about that buildup, right? So we really need to peak emissions globally, like this year, unfortunately. So we really need to start reducing emissions now. And that's where our fuels come in. And so when we consider that buildup in the atmosphere, we really talk about this time value of carbon and the need to reduce emissions today rather than waiting to do so. Because if you wait 5 years to just reduce your emissions by 1 ton, you have to reduce emissions by 13 tons just to have the same impact in mitigating climate change. So it's a really big deal that we get our fuels into UP's engines and others, because getting it done today is what's so important in replacing petroleum. So we are working with UP, other railroads, the original equipment manufacturers, the engine manufacturers, to make sure that all of the safety measures, all of the efficiency measures that they need can be met by biodiesel and renewable diesel, so that they can be used in today's engines in higher volumes, so you can see greater emission reductions and have really great cost-effective benefits by making that drop-in fuel, rather than having to switch out the engine technologies as Thad was talking about for the longer term haul. And I know Mark will talk more about the details of that in a little bit. So if we can go to the next slide, I'd like to just explain a little bit about how we manage all of this, right? Thad was showing numbers, so of course we have to quantify things and how we calculate these things, and so we have to track it. And our fuel producers already have great information from their feedstock providers, from all of the inputs that go into producing the fuel, to calculate their carbon intensity, that greenhouse gas information that helps our fuels compete through different policy incentives. But of course, the demand signal coming from Union Pacific and from its customers and others to reduce their transportation emissions shows us that we need to be able to translate that information. We talk in the fuel world, as Thad referenced, about carbon intensity, but of course, when Thad was talking about UP's goals, he showed, those scope emissions. And so we have to make sure that all of that information aligns. So if you go to the next slide, it's really the work that we're doing with UP and with other companies and standard setters like the Science-Based Targets Initiative, the Smart Freight Center, Greenhouse Gas Protocol, and others, is to make sure that we're aligning that information and able to communicate it in the right way so that everybody has the correct information and that it's a streamlined process so that the information can be in a form that will help folks like UP understand the benefits of our fuels. So that's the emission side, right? So then, being able to provide UP with that 10% next year, that 20% down the road. We've had really great success in growing our market since the beginning, some of the first federal and state policies to replace petroleum. And we have a vision at Clean Fuels that we created back in 2020 to really provide for 6 billion gallon market across all of our three fuels by 2030. But we're definitely going to hit that ahead of schedule if you look at this graphic, right? Of course, regulatory certainty and policies always kind of impact how ahead of schedule that will be. And I think also the voluntary demand. I know we're seeing great signals from all of our markets, and that voluntary demand, that's something kind of newer to our industry as everybody's kind of ramped up this decarbonization journey over the last few years. We're really looking forward to being able to work with our end-use partners and their customers who are really having that demand signal brought up to us upstream so that we can make sure that we can get that growth at the rate that everyone needs to help decarbonize now and sooner rather than later, given the needs that we have. So go to the next slide. So before I pass it to Chris, just want to make sure to sum up that our fuels help mitigate climate change today, and rail is using them today, of course, to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. We're working to make sure that the quantification of those benefits is passed on to UP, to all fuel consumers and their customers, so that it can show up on all of your ledgers to make sure that you understand and can get the credit for the work that you're doing. And we're really looking forward to ensuring that those demand signals help mitigate some of the regulatory uncertainty we have in the near term, as we all know what's happening in just a month's time, right? So I'll leave it there and happy to answer questions when we have the chance, and I'll pass it over to Chris.
Thank you, Veronica. Appreciate that. So next, we wanted to provide an overview of how Union Pacific is helping our customers produce and distribute renewable fuels while helping our economy become more sustainable. So for us, renewable fuels consists of biodiesel, renewable diesel, and sustainable aviation fuel. And producers typically use a combination of feedstocks to produce those. The feedstocks for those products include soybean oil, which is produced at soybean crush plants, waste animal fats from meat processing plants, and distillers corn oil, which is produced at ethanol plants. As you heard from Veronica, biofuels are part of a circular economy as they reuse waste products and agricultural products as feedstocks for fuel. UP has a large and diverse network of feedstock producers with access to over 120 locations throughout our network in the Western United States. That number of locations actually grows quite a bit when we're factoring in our access and connections to partner railroads in the Eastern United States. Our vast network of feedstock producers allow renewable fuels producers to diversify their supply and secure domestically produced feedstocks at really competitive prices. Union Pacific, we provide an unmatched network of rail terminals when it comes to our manifest service product, which allows our customers to consolidate feedstocks from multiple producers. In some instances, for some facilities, they're bringing in using hundreds of different suppliers to meet their needs when you consider that they have 1 million of gallons of product demand for each plant. So that diversity of supply really helps, and that manifest network to consolidate product from multiple origins allows them to provide a lot of value in their minds. We have an unmatched network of rail terminals when it comes to our manifest service product. Our franchise consists of access to over 40 locations that produce animal fats and oils, access to over 62 ethanol plants that produces approximately 2 billion pounds of corn oil annually. And lastly, UP has access to 24 soybean crush plants, which is approximately 90% of the soybean oil production in the US. So the next slide here outlines our finished renewable fuels market. The map on the left outlines renewable fuel producers on UP's network. As you can see, that production is scattered throughout the UP network as refineries have made the transition from refining crude oil into using renewable feedstocks. Renewable fuels demand is not always where the renewable fuels are produced, so we're helping our customers reach new markets where renewable fuels are produced. So we can help our customers reach new markets in states like California, Oregon, Texas, and others where we have where the customers have the demand to consume renewable fuels and increase their renewable fuel blends, as Veronica was outlining with the policy incentives. UP and our customers, we've developed a network of transloads and terminals for the distribution of renewable fuels to fueling locations scattered all throughout the Western United States. Some of these terminals were existing terminals that we were able to modify their operations to incorporate renewable fuels, while others developed new terminals specifically designed to meet the needs of this new market. Union Pacific has an industrial development team that is dedicated to helping our existing and new customers locate and develop terminals all throughout our network. A common misperception in the marketplace is that customers need to make large investments to start transporting renewable fuels, which is not the case at all. Our network allows for the flexibility for our customers to secure a first mover advantage in new markets and start with manifest service, which requires significantly less capital for things like track, inventory, and storage capacity, with the flexibility to grow into unit train volumes if the market growth dictates that. Union Pacific is continuing to invest capital throughout our network to improve our operations and increase our efficiency, which allows us to provide the most economical transportation solution for our customer base when you compare that to truck and vessel alternatives. We are expecting to continue to see growth in this market. Total renewable diesel refining capacity in the United States has grown approximately 4.8 billion gallons of capacity, with another 1.1 billion gallons expected to come online next year. As Clarissa outlined, railroads are the safest mode of ground transportation and the most economical way to move large quantities of renewable fuels into advanced markets. We are also the most environmentally responsible option and can reduce carbon emissions in the transportation of renewable fuels. As an example, railroads can transport 285 gallons of renewable fuel 480 miles on a single gallon of fuel, generating up to 75% less carbon emissions than truck. As you can see from this chart, our volume has grown significantly over the past 5 years, with additional growth in the future as production grows and renewable fuels adoption grows as well. We're very proud of our role in helping our customers grow renewable fuels production and enhancing the distribution supply chain to lower the cost for our customers as well as carbon emissions. We look forward to continuing to work with our customers as the same renewable fuels adoption grows. Thank you very much. Now I'll turn it over to Mark Lutz to share some of our pilot projects we have underway.
All right, thank you, Chris, and hello, everybody. As you heard Thad mention a few minutes ago, when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions at UP, it's all about the locomotive. So I thought I would spend a few minutes and introduce you to the locomotives that we're talking about. So what you see here in front of you on this slide is an example of one of our units. It's a 6-axle, 12-cylinder, 4,400 horsepower diesel locomotive built by Wabtec. This is their Evo series. 4,400 horsepower is equivalent to roughly 3,300 kilowatts. This particular unit is 73 feet long, it stands over 16 feet high, and weighs over 430,000 pounds. The unit is capable of a max speed of 75 miles per hour while pulling a continuous traction of 166,000 pounds. It's equipped with a 5,000-gallon fuel tank, which gives us about 200 megawatt hours of energy that allows us to pull a train for about 1,500 miles at 75 mile an hour. Next slide, please. The power plant behind this engine is a 4-stroke, 12-cylinder, 188.5-liter engine with a turbocharger. And that engine generates over 4,500 gross horsepower, running at about 1,050 RPM. Now, as you can imagine, these locomotives are expensive. On average, each one of these locomotives costs us about $4 million new. And so for that reason, when we talk about new fuels and new technology, it's paramount that we do some testing. Next slide, please. Now, there are some risks when using biofuels that require that testing. To better understand these risks, Union Pacific is testing trains in the LA Basin and in Northern California on various blends of biofuels. We're partnering with other railroads, like the CN and the MXV facility in Pueblo, Colorado, to further test various biofuel blends. And I'm pleased to report that our testing efforts have been very successful this far, and that have resulted in both OEMs giving us approval for fuel blends containing up to 50% renewable diesel and 11% biodiesel. And we're on the cusp of even going higher. In fact, I anticipate testing will continue through the first quarter, and we'll be able to achieve approval from both OEMs for fuel blends containing up to 100% renewable diesel and as high as 20% biodiesel. Now, the biofuel specifications that these OEMs requiring are largely consistent with those of the ASTM fuel specs. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jeff in case you're asking the question, how do we sell our fuel to UP? Over to you, Jeff.
All right, thanks, Mark. My team is responsible for the procurement of Union Pacific's internal diesel needs, as well as the logistics associated with moving that diesel to our fleet of locomotives. We are one of the largest end users of diesel in the world, as we consume over 900 million gallons per year. In 2024, we're on pace to buy close to 50 million gallons of biofuels, consisting of biodiesel and renewable diesel, with plans to double that in 2025, as you've heard from Thad and Mark. The map on the slide shows our largest fueling locations across our system, and my team is always looking for new suppliers to partner with as we buy more and more biofuels. If you're interested, feel free to reach out to me directly, and we can discuss supply options in more detail, and my email is included on the slide. With that, I'll hand it back to you, Clarissa.
Thank you, everyone. And now I've seen some great questions coming in. And again, there are 3 different ways to ask questions. You can email us at connectup@up.com. Some of you have been great about putting some questions right in the chat. And you can also send us questions using the QR code. We want to ask you right now, we're just going to test the polling feature here and would love for you to respond to this poll. Did you find the information we shared today to be useful? And so far, 6 responses out of 70. So we'd love for you to respond to this poll. And I believe this poll can be running while we respond to questions. I believe we can have 2 polls running simultaneously. So I'm going to also introduce a second poll. And please, as we answer questions, feel free to respond to both of them. And so the second question we have for you is, as we said before, the hurricane preparedness webinar revealed to us, based on your responses, that you wanted to hear about this topic. we want to make sure we continue to give information and hold webinars that you care about. And so which of these topics interest you most for future webinars? And I see your responses coming in. And some of you may have joined the public safety webinar we had less than about a few weeks ago. And that was actually our most highly attended one. And we definitely plan to do that again, maybe a couple times going forward in the year. So thank you for responding to those. And now we're going to actually jump into the questions. And please remember to continue responding to those polls. And I'm going to jump into the questions that you started to send in. And so my first question is for Thad. And that question is, in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, where do railroads fall compared to the other sectors?
Compared to the other sectors, if you're thinking about, was the question about transportation, other transportation sectors, or sectors of the total economy? If it's total economy, transportation, it's really, I think, a cool stat. Transportation accounts for a little less than a third of all greenhouse gas emissions in the United States, just to start there, right? Think about that, a third. A lot of that, quite frankly, is happening on the highway, right? That's all the miles that you and I are driving every day. Rail is only about 2% of that one-third share, but it's a much vaster percentage of the total number of ton miles that are hauled. So rail is really efficient when it comes to moving large, heavy stuff, lots of freight, very economically, and also not very intensively when it comes to greenhouse gases.
Thank you, Thad. This next question is for Veronica. So Veronica, what other states are looking at biofuel incentives? And do you see that growing among the states?
Oh my goodness. So many states are looking at things. So we have generally major low carbon fuel policies on the West Coast, the entirety of the West Coast, Washington, Oregon, California, now in New Mexico is kind of the next state that's adopted a similar strategy. We have different policies in the Midwest and the Northeast as well. And they are kind of all active. Certainly see a lot of interest in that similar kind of low carbon fuel standard policy on the West Coast, popping up in the Midwest and in the Northeast. But there are conversations happening in the Southeast as well. I think everybody's trying to figure out how to get the fuel to them as soon as possible to help on that decarbonization journey.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Veronica. This next question is for Mark. Mark, given that locomotive fuel efficiency has advanced significantly, is it correct to assume that further improvements may be tough to achieve, challenging? What specific areas still offer potential for enhancing locomotive efficiency?
Well, that's a really good question, and it's one that a lot of us are working on, including both OEMs. What I can offer you is that probably the best way for UP to increase its efficiency is to continue our journey on fleet modernization. UP is spending tens of millions of dollars in modernizing our fleet, and with comes that is more efficiency in the form of fuel economy, lower emissions, and more tractive effort. And so that is probably our biggest handle, and one that we're going to continue pursuing vigorously. New technology is also being pursued. You've mentioned you heard Thad talk about hybrids. We are also going to be piloting battery electric locomotives. But those advanced technologies, new technologies, they'll take years to prove out. And that's something that the industry as a whole will be pursuing.
Hey, Mark, if I could add, you're absolutely correct on that. One other area that has a lot of fuel efficiency potential left in it for the railroads is simply on the operating and network efficiency side. So the minivan I drive or the car that you drive kind of has a set efficiency, right? But if you're running it across the country and have cruise control, you're going to see improved fuel efficiency versus driving around in town with a lot of stop and go. When our network is more efficient, and when we have this operational excellence that Clarissa so rightly kicked off with, we use less fuel simply because there's less stop and go, less idling, less waiting around. And that is another area that we continue to press on. We've done it for years now to help us consume less fuel. There are operational initiatives underway to make that happen even faster, as well as some technological initiatives underway. Imagine being able to, you've got 3 locomotives pulling a train because you need 3 to get over the Rockies. Well, what do you do when you're over the Rockies, right? Being able to remotely reach out and turn off that middle unit, because on the downhill side, you just don't need it to be running at all. That's a really good example of some of the technology that we're still working on implementing that can help us save fuel without necessarily having to get inside the guts of the locomotive.
Thank you, Thad. This next one, Jeff, and then maybe Mark will add to it if needed. But the question is, how different or similar is the biodiesel used in an ideal UP delivery compared to an SAF for airlines? How technically different are these fuels?
I mean, it's very similar to the difference between jet and diesel. They're made for different applications. There's jet fuel, obviously. One of the big difference with jet fuel itself is you have higher levels of kerosene in it, and that helps with the cold flow properties, specifically when you're flying at high altitudes. It's very cold, and you can't have the fuel gelling up or freezing. Diesel isn't quite as sensitive to that, obviously. So technically, you probably technically could run some jet fuel in a locomotive, but it would run hot and it wouldn't be something you'd want to do. They're both derived from the same products, either if you're looking at a renewable product or at a crude oil-based product, and they're run through the same type of refining application with probably more impurities pulled out of the jet fuel. That's about as technical as I could get with the difference between those two.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you. Go ahead, chime in, Veronica, and then it looks like Mark as well.
Yeah, I was just going to add, so biodiesel goes through a different chemical process called transesterification, whereas renewable diesel and jet fuel are what we call a hydrotreatment process. So biodiesel, that's why you see in Mark's slides that biodiesel isn't getting quite as high of blend limits as renewable diesel, because renewable diesel's process is more similar to the petroleum refining process than biodiesel's, but they're very complementary. Biodiesel production process is much more cost effective.
The one difference that I would point out between renewable diesel and the airline equivalents is the density. So renewable diesel gives you much more gallons, per pound than the aviation equivalent, and so given that we're all in the volume business, there's more profitability, more volume in it for renewable diesel, and that's certainly what the railroads can use.
Awesome. If this was a test, I would pick all of the above. Now I know. So thank you all. This next question is for Chris. Chris, for a new shipper or receiver, what's the first step if they want to work with Union Pacific?
Yeah, I would say if you're an existing customer, contact your account representative, and we'd be more than happy to walk you through the process. What that process looks like is getting on our website, up.com, looking at our industrial development group area, and submitting a project request, and we'll have an industrial development manager quickly get back to you to set up kind of what that process looks like. Obviously, there's a lot of variability, and are we starting from brand new with a greenfield site, or are you changing from an existing facility and updating what you need? So a lot of those questions would be asked, and we'll walk you through what that process looks like.
Awesome. Thank you. This one's for Thad and Veronica. It's really about supply. Are there enough biofuels for the entire market? What do you think?
We've had these. I'm going to let Veronica take this. She's got the biggest picture, the industry picture here. When we've looked at it, we don't see that as an issue for us. But Veronica, do you want to chip in?
Yeah, no, I would totally agree. I think one of the real benefits of the technology processes that biodiesel and then renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuel users, that they use a lot of different feedstocks. So I know that's usually people's concern about the constraints around the bio-based feedstocks that go into the production process, but we have a wide variety, and there's a lot of synergies with other markets, whether they're agricultural or waste markets, that help support the future growth of those feedstock markets to ensure that we'll have enough fuel for all the needs.
Awesome. Thanks. So, and this can go to any panelist. It's specific about what we have across states and availability. So what sorts of biofuel blends is UP using in states with LCFS type programs? I see that in your 2023 blend on average was about 6%. What sort of state level blends are we seeing?
So I can start with that. With biofuels, we're able to use up to for biodiesel, we're able to use up to 10% blends right now. We're seeing that in Illinois. In California, we're using a lot more renewable diesel and biodiesel as well, and we're seeing up to 30+% blends of renewable. Most other states are seeing about a 5% blend of biodiesel. It's really economic driven outside of those states where there's really good incentives like Illinois and in California.
Awesome. Thank you. This next question is for Mark or Thad or both of you. And it's, what about hydrogen locomotives? What's Union Pacific's position on them?
We're...
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay. Mark can maybe fill in the technical gaps. He's definitely got the chops to do that too. But from a policy perspective, we're all of the above in terms of exploring and looking at different propulsion technologies, be it hydrogen, be it electric, be it battery, be it biofuels. However, economics are going to drive a lot of that. And this is one, I know I started by saying it's all about the locomotive, right? When it comes to final technology solution, it's not all about the locomotive, because there's a whole surrounding power ecosystem that's got to go around that. How is that hydrogen or electricity or biofuels going to get to the locomotive, and all the different safety, supplier, getting it from a supply car to across the coupler to the locomotive. There's a lot of technological and other economic and kind of, if you want to call it, community and national support questions that have to be answered over the long term. Hydrogen, we're blessed to have a couple other Class 1 railroads exploring that. We work together in the American Association of Railroads Decarbonization Committee, where we're able to share some of our different learnings from testings. And so we look forward to learning from those railroads about what they're learning about hydrogen. But we note that they, and along with some other technologies like full-scale electrification, have some real costs and other technological issues around it. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Mark, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I just really want to pile on to the comments you made, Thad, about the technological hurdles. And when it comes to hydrogen, the biggest one is a fundamental one, and it's all about energy density. And hydrogen just doesn't have many BTUs per pound, and as a result, for it to be used as a fuel for us to travel 1,000 miles, 1,500 miles like we do today with a tank of diesel, you would have to carry another rail car full of either very cold material or material that's under extremely high pressure. And both of those not only provide economic challenge, but provide severe technical challenges that would have to be overcome by the industry. So, hydrogen, much like electrification or battery electrics, is a new technology and one that will take years to develop. And as Thad mentioned, UP is following these markets. We have chosen to test the battery electric units and to develop hybrid technology. That's kind of where we're leading, but other railroads are leading in hydrogen, and we're following those closely.
Excellent. Thank you. This next question is for Jeff. How has Union Pacific been able to take advantage of state biodiesel incentives in states including, right now, Minnesota and Texas? Have we been able to lean into those incentives?
Yeah, so depends on what the incentives are in each state. In some states, they're tax incentives. For example, Illinois is a state where we fully take advantage and enjoy the benefits that are therein, where we don't have to pay a state sales tax. In places like Minnesota and Texas, it's a producer tax, it's a tax that it's an incentive that we don't get to enjoy because we already don't pay for those taxes. So basically, can't remember the exact Texas tax incentive there, but it's one where we don't even have to pay those taxes as it is, so we don't get any benefit there. And that is something we're working with these different states to see if there is a way of including us in a different type of incentive in those states, not only Texas and Minnesota, but also Nebraska and other states. But we fully are looking and trying to find places where we can incorporate the state incentives.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. This question, many of you may respond to, but it's back. It's still in the theme of taxes. I guess it's tis the season-ish. How will phasing out the blender's tax credit in 2025 and the adoption of the clean fuel producer tax credit affect Union Pacific's business?
That might be me as well for on the procurement side. It is what we've seen across people who are trying to sell biofuels is a great concern because it's an unknown exactly what the values are going to be for those credits. In the past, $1 per gallon was very simple and easy to understand. And in the future, it's starting in January, we think it's going to be a little bit different. So it's an unknown. Some suppliers are willing to roll with it and take the risk, and others are sitting on the sideline waiting to see how the markets enroll. So we see that as a potential risk and more of an unknown, and we expect that the markets will figure it out. And there's multiple ways of pricing points on biofuels, not only with the RFSI, but with RINs and other things that we think will balance it out.
Awesome. I think it'll be interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add, because I think that's kind of what I was referencing when I was talking about some of the policy uncertainty. So we do have, as Jeff was saying, the blender's tax credit of $1 per gallon is going to be phased out, and this clean fuel production tax credit that's based on that carbon intensity score. So the better the lower the greenhouse gas profile of the fuel, the better the incentive will be. But it does only go up to $1. So you'd have to have a net zero fuel to get the full dollar. So there is some uncertainty because the Treasury has not come out with the guidance and the rules exactly on how that carbon intensity will be calculated for our fuel producers. But I think that's to me, it's certainly, not to belittle it, but it is a short-term uncertainty. So in the next quarter, 2 quarters, we'll have a good sense of where that's going, and I think the markets will pick up from there, and everything will kind of run back, hopefully the best they can, back to normal based on that.
And Veronica, over the medium term, wouldn't you say too, it's not a static carbon intensity game in terms of what farmers in the ag sector, for example, are doing in terms of their carbon intensities? Wouldn't you say so?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've seen carbon intensity go down for our fuels over time, and there are all sorts of mechanisms, which I think is in part why we don't quite have the rules yet. But to your point, that in particular, the benefits that we can see if we improve land management practices in agriculture to get those agricultural feedstocks carbon intensity down, that adds to it, right? It's all pieces of the supply chain that add up to that final carbon intensity. So there's a lot of opportunity there to lower CI over the long term.
Yeah, we're certainly a fan of that. So go ag sector.
Excellent. This next question is from Mark. How does the efficiency of biofuels compare to conventional diesel locomotives? And do biofuel and renewable diesel offer similar levels of efficiency?
Well, there's probably 2 ways to answer that question. The first is from a fuel economy, and that one has a bit of a headwind for us in the rail sector. So biofuels have less energy per gallon than traditional petroleum diesel. In other words, you need to use slightly more gallons of a biofuel to get the same amount of work done as you would with petroleum diesel. Now, the other side of that, however, is a positive, and that is around the greenhouse gas emissions, or even the emissions around nitrogen oxides and PM, which are less so in biofuels. And when it comes to greenhouse gas, biofuels result in about a 72% of the greenhouse gas of normal petroleum. And so we do see a substantial reduction in that area, or an improvement in efficiency.
Thank you, Mark. And I'm going to ask one final question that's come in. And while I do that, if you haven't responded to our polls, please do. Your feedback will really, really help us a lot figure out just the right balance of how we should run these and what topics we should cover. So, Mark, this final question is for you. Is there anything we can do as producers to help move the rail industry forward faster?
Well, I would probably keep it real simple, and that is make more. The more supply, the better the economics will be for the railroad and for all end users to substitute biofuels for petroleum diesel. And the more production out there, we all win.
Awesome. Well, any final comments from any of our panelists before we close out? And again, please take a moment to go to the polls if you haven't. Any final comments, panelists? Well, this was exciting. This was super exciting. Thank you all for your knowledge. I know I learned even more as a result of listening in addition to preparing for this. So thank you. Thank you, everyone who joined us today. Following this call, we're going to share a link with you with the recording, and you can share it with others in your organizations. If you have any questions that we didn't get to, please reach out to us. Reach out to your sales manager or email connect@up.com. Thank you so much for attending.